There are periods in life when nothing feels completely wrong, but nothing is really moving forward either. You keep working, you keep thinking, you keep trying to hold everything together. On the outside, things look stable, but inside, there is this quiet feeling like standing in front of a half-closed door. You sense that an answer exists on the other side. You can almost feel it. It is just not time to open it yet. For Capricorn, waiting is never random. It always carries a reason, a purpose, a silent test. And over the past few days, as your mind has felt heavier, as every decision seems to require extra care, you may have found yourself asking, what am I waiting for? Or what is being prepared within me right now? Because sometimes the universe does not hold you back to make things harder. It pauses you so you can hear yourself more clearly. So you can understand what you are truly feeling before you step through that door. And that is where our story begins. Lately, Capricorn may have noticed something quietly unusual. You have been thinking more than usual. Not loud thoughts, not dramatic ones, but thoughts that repeat themselves, softly, steadily, like the ticking of a clock in a silent room. You think a lot, yet you say very little. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you are not sure if anyone truly needs to hear it. You write a message, read it again, then delete it. Not out of fear, but because you do not want to speak while you are still unclear within yourself. And sometimes, there is this tight feeling inside, hard to put into words. Not exactly sadness, not quite anger, just a quiet pressure. As if something inside you wants to be acknowledged but has not yet found its shape or its voice. If this is happening, it may not be because you are weak, and it is not because you lack strength. Capricorn has never been the type to be easily swept away by emotion. You are used to carrying responsibility, used to staying steady, used to handling things on your own, with order, with control. But mental pressure does not always come from major events. Sometimes it comes from prolonged silence. From being so accustomed to understanding yourself that you forget your emotions also need to be heard, not just managed. During this time, your mind may feel slowed down, not to make things harder for you, but to stop you from brushing past feelings that have never been named. Things you keep telling yourself do not need attention yet. Questions you set aside because you believe you are too busy. Capricorn has a very familiar habit. You allow yourself to stop only when everything is finished. You allow yourself to breathe only after responsibility has been set down. But life does not always wait until everything is neatly arranged before sending a signal. The pressure you are feeling may not be asking you to act right away. It may simply be inviting you to be more honest with yourself. Honest about what is tiring you. Honest about what you have been holding up for far too long. And honest about the quiet desires that have been overlooked for days, for months, maybe even for years. You may not find an answer immediately, and that is okay. Not every pressure needs to be resolved by a decision. Some pressure only needs to be recognized, only needs to be acknowledged, allowed to exist, understood as something that has a reason for being there. When you allow yourself to pause for a moment, not to escape, but to observe, you may begin to see that this pressure is not here to break you. It is here to remind you that you are not only the one responsible for everything. You are also human. You have emotions. You have limits. You have a need to rest, even within your own mind. Capricorn does not need to become someone else to move through this phase. You only need to become a more honest version of yourself. Holding a little less tension. Staying a little less silent with your own emotions. And perhaps, when you allow this pressure to exist without judgment, you will begin to sense a very gentle shift. Nothing loud, nothing sudden, just enough to let you know that something inside you is slowly becoming clearer. There is no need to go anywhere yet. Just stay with yourself a little longer. Because sometimes, it is in that quiet space that Capricorn finally begins to hear what they truly need. Then there comes a very quiet moment. Not a bell ringing, not a clear sign. Just a brief second when Cancer suddenly realizes they have been searching for the answer in the same place for far too long. You are used to waiting for answers to come from familiar paths, from trying a little harder, from enduring a little longer, from hoping that if you are patient enough, loving enough, listening enough, everything will eventually fall into place. But as Mercury begins to shift, you may start to sense something different. Not clearly. Just a subtle feeling that the old direction no longer resonates. The familiar thoughts no longer bring the same sense of comfort. The reasons you once used to reassure yourself begin to fall silent. And in that quiet space, the answer may arrive in a completely different way. Not through analysis, not through logic, but through feeling. It might come through a casual conversation, someone sharing their own story, something that has nothing to do with you. And yet, somewhere in their words, your heart stirs gently. Not because you understand everything, but because you recognize that you have heard this before. Somewhere deep within yourself, a long time ago. It might come through a single sentence, spoken without intention. A sentence not meant to answer your question at all. Yet it stays. It repeats itself in your mind throughout the day. Not disruptive, just quietly resting there, like a small stone fitting perfectly in the palm of your hand. Or perhaps the answer comes as a very clear intuition. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a moment when your heart suddenly settles. No more arguing, no more convincing yourself. For Cancer, truth rarely arrives as a bright flash of light. It comes like the tide, slowly rising. And by the time you notice it, it has already been there for a while. You may begin to wonder if you are imagining things, if this feeling can be trusted, if you should wait a little longer just to be sure. And that is very Cancer. You are always trying to protect your heart from rushed decisions. But there is a subtle difference in this moment. The truth does not make you more anxious. It does not quicken your heartbeat. It does not demand immediate action. Instead, it carries an unexpected sense of calm, as if you have just set down a weight you have been carrying for far too long, as if someone gently whispered that you do not need to push harder to understand. You only need to allow yourself to feel. Cancer has a deep emotional intelligence. But because you are used to living for others, for connection, for safety, you sometimes forget that your intuition also deserves trust. This moment of awakening does not force you to change right away. It simply shifts your perspective softly. You begin to realize that the answer is not always found by doing more. Sometimes it is found by stopping in the right place, by no longer searching where everything has already run dry. And perhaps the most important part of this moment is that you no longer feel the need to prove your feelings to anyone. You do not need to convince the world that you are right. It is enough that it feels true to you. Cancer's awakening is not loud, but it is deep. It does not erase every question, but it shows you which questions no longer need to be asked. And when you realize that, even without taking action, even without a clear decision, something inside you has shifted. A shift that cannot be undone. The answer may not have been spoken out loud yet, but your heart has already heard it. And then, there comes a moment when Cancer begins to realize that the fog no longer covers everything the way it used to. Not because you tried harder to understand, but because something inside you has finally grown quiet enough to look straight ahead. As Mercury moves into deeper energy, the truth does not arrive like a shock. It does not rush in to overwhelm you. It comes slowly, in small pieces, just enough that you can no longer pretend you do not see it. You begin to recognize who truly cares about you. Not through promises, not through dramatic moments, but through the way they stay when you are no longer strong. Through the way they listen when you do not say much. Through the way they do not ask you to become someone else in order to be accepted. This truth does not make you sad right away. It simply makes you quieter. Because some names you once placed so much hope in no longer echo in your heart the same way. And some people you barely noticed before begin to appear, quietly, in the most honest moments. Cancer also begins to see clearly what has been holding you in place. Not love, but habit. The familiarity of staying still feels easier than stepping forward. The sense of safety that comes from what is known, even when it no longer nourishes you. You may realize that you stayed too long in a space simply because you were afraid of disappointing others, or because you became used to sacrificing your own emotions to keep everything calm. You once believed that was love, but now, looking back, you may quietly ask yourself whether love truly requires that much silence. And then, another truth appears. The places where you gave away too much of yourself emotionally, not in one big moment, but in many small ones. Each time you said you were fine when you were not. Each time you listened to others and forgot to ask yourself how you were feeling. Each time you told yourself you would be okay as long as everyone else was. This truth does not come to blame you. It does not tell you that you were wrong. It simply shows you gently the cost of always placing your own emotions last. At first, as these things become clearer, you may feel a certain heaviness, not because you are weak, but because you are letting go of illusions that once helped you survive for a very long time. And yet, this is where Cancer may begin to feel something different. This truth does not break you. It does not take away what is precious within you. It only removes the need to continue enduring in silence. When you no longer have to convince yourself that everything is fine even when, deep down, you know it is not. A new space begins to open, a space of honesty, a space where you do not have to be strong all the time. Cancer has the capacity to love very deeply, but that love was never meant to flow only outward. It also needs to return to nourish you. This clarity does not force you to cut things off immediately. It does not ask you to change everything in a single day. It simply places a new choice in front of you. The choice between continuing to endure out of familiarity or beginning to respect your own emotions, slowly, one step at a time. And perhaps the most important gift of this moment is that you no longer feel guilty for looking at the truth directly. You understand that recognizing how much you have sacrificed does not make you selfish. It simply makes you more honest with yourself. The truth, even when it is not easy to hear, is sometimes the very first door that leads you out of prolonged endurance. And when Cancer allows themselves to stand in front of that door, without needing to walk through it yet, simply choosing not to turn away, something inside you has already begun to feel truly free. At some point, Cancer begins to realize that the answer which has just arrived is not here simply to fix one specific situation. It does not come to help you say the right words, choose the perfect timing, or make someone else more comfortable. It comes to bring an ending to a way of seeing yourself that you have carried for far too long. There are familiar images that once helped you survive. The image of the one who always waits for others to change first. The image of the one who tries to understand everyone, even when no one asks if you are okay. The image of the one who endures just a little more to keep everything peaceful. Those images were not wrong. They were formed during times when you needed them to survive, to stay connected, to avoid being left behind. But over time, you may begin to feel that you have been living inside those roles instead of living as yourself. At this moment, the answer feels like the tide pulling back. As the water recedes, the ground beneath becomes visible. You can see clearly where you have been standing and how long you have been there. And in that moment, you no longer feel the need to keep wearing those old labels on your chest. Cancer begins to understand that always waiting for others to change made you forget your own right to choose. That always understanding everyone was sometimes a way to avoid facing your own needs. And that enduring for the sake of harmony has cost you more energy than you ever allowed yourself to reclaim. This shift does not make you cold. It does not turn you into someone who loves less. It simply makes you more honest about what you need in order to stay in any relationship or any situation. A new version of you begins to emerge very slowly. Not someone who always says no. Not someone who demands. But someone who knows clearly what they need to feel emotionally safe. You begin to realize that respect is not something you have to ask for. It is not a reward for endurance. It is the foundation that allows you to continue giving with a full heart. And when you no longer need to ask permission to have your emotions respected, you also no longer feel the need to explain yourself endlessly. You do not need to prove that you tried hard enough. You do not need to list everything you have sacrificed. It is enough to know that your feelings are real and that they deserve a place at the table equal to everything else. Cancer is deeply sensitive to shifts in emotional atmosphere. So when an old identity begins to fade, you may feel empty for a moment. Not because you lost something precious, but because you are stepping out of a familiar role, one where you always knew what you were supposed to do. Yet within that emptiness, There is a strange sense of relief. You no longer have to monitor other people's emotions before listening to your own. You no longer have to tell yourself that if you just endure a little longer, everything will be fine. This new version of you is not loud. It does not need announcements. It reveals itself through small choices, through stopping sooner when something feels wrong, through stating your needs without adding an apology, through allowing yourself to leave spaces that no longer nourish you. The answer arrived to close a cycle. Not the cycle of love, but the cycle of losing yourself in the act of loving. And as Cancer begins to live with this clarity, you do not become less caring toward others. You simply stop abandoning yourself. The old identity slowly steps back, not in conflict, not in resentment, but in quiet gratitude for having fulfilled its role. And ahead of you is not a more perfect person, but a more honest one. A Cancer who knows what they need and no longer asks permission to live in alignment with their own feelings. After the answer has arrived, Cancer may not notice the change right away. There is no applause, no major date circled on the calendar, just a different feeling when you wake up and begin a new day. Decisions seem to come more quickly, not because you are rushing, but because you are no longer carrying so many questions behind every choice. That familiar hesitation, the constant weighing of possibilities to avoid hurting someone, slowly begins to fade. You do not become harder. You simply become clearer. You may notice that you no longer ask yourself as often whether you should or should not. Not because everything has become simple, but because something inside you has become steady. A quiet trust in your own inner sense. Your heart feels lighter in a way that is difficult to describe, not a burst of joy. Just the absence of so many layers of defense. No longer needing to guess what you must do to keep everything from falling apart. Cancer is used to waiting for signals from the outside, a word of reassurance, an action that proves something, a change in someone else to confirm that you are on the right path. But after this moment, you may begin to realize that you no longer need those signals as much as you once did. Not because you care less, but because you have learned to listen to the truth inside you first. This week is not an ending. It is not a climax either. It feels more like a current slowly changing direction. Not powerful all at once, but steady. You may still be in the same space, still talking to familiar people, still doing the things you have done for a long time. Yet the way you show up in all of it is different. You no longer try to read other people's emotions before feeling your own. You no longer set aside your needs to keep everything peaceful at any cost. And most importantly, you no longer treat someone else's silence as the measure of your worth. Cancer. After tomorrow is not a completely new person. You do not need to strip away what has always made you who you are. Your gentleness, your care, your ability to love deeply. All of that remains. Only one thing changes. You no longer sacrifice yourself to keep those qualities alive. This new way of living is not loud. It does not ask for declarations. It shows itself in small choices, in allowing yourself to rest when you are tired, in no longer staying in places that cause your heart to tighten, in being honest with yourself, even when you are not yet ready to speak that truth out loud. There may be moments when you return to the old feelings, doubt, sensitivity, the desire to wait for one more sign just to be sure. And that does not undo the change that is happening. This new current does not require perfection. It only asks that you return to honesty. Cancer no longer lives waiting for the outside world to agree. You begin to live from an inner agreement, one that is very quiet, but very real. And from that place, everything begins to shift in its own way. No force, no pushing. Only your willingness to stay with your truth long enough. This week opens a different way of living. Not a place where you stop loving, but a place where you no longer lose yourself in the act of loving. After tomorrow, the current has changed direction. And Cancer, even if you cannot yet name everything, has already begun to walk forward with a new kind of trust. A trust that the truth inside you is strong enough that you no longer need to wait for any signal from the outside world.